they have now been working on the first project, the quarry project, for 2 weeks. And during that time, there was a pinup. Then we asked them to do a first design at a very small scale that you see here of one project, of this outside classroom, sheltered out of the rain and the sun. You see the scale of the person to the total project. There was a pinup to criticize that project. And then we asked them to blow it up in scale to quarter scale that you see here, and more detail. And revise at the same time based on the criticism that they received. And so, in addition to the model that you see, we also asked them to make drawings of sections and plans and details of their project. This is a typical one. Now, at this point we had a review where I asked people from offices around Boston as well as other faculty to come and criticize them. So this was their very first review of exposing their work to other people. And what you're about to see is a typical review of what I call a one-on-one or small, quiet discussions between one or two faculty and one student. It's my belief that it's more educational if you can not have the old style jury system, which was a number of faculty listening to the student presenting and then criticizing, which I don't think was too educational. This way is more quiet, but I think it's more, it's fact that it's more informal makes it more educational. I think students get more out of it. So you're about to see a typical review of what I call one-on-ones, although you may find two faculty or two people with one student.
Basically, my project looks like, discuss it, but the entrance where you come in from the trail is sort of about here, so that would be view of it as you come in.
I think it's good that you both focused on seeing your idea about the site.
I started out, my shapes were more sort of fish and uniform, sort of curvy and nothing really geometric about it at all. And I almost felt like I was sort of wishy-washy between blending in really and not. And so I didn't really feel like I was capable of duplicating anything that could compete with that. So I sort of took the approach of, well, I'm going to do something that's obviously not imitating, but still drawing on some of the principles that I really come in. If I were there, I know exactly where I'd be going, and it's right here.
I'm not saying that about yours. I think you.
But I like very much the way that it breaks down.
I chose to do it this way because
I'd love to see you.
My thinking was when you were with the big group, you were just sort of internal to the group, whatever the group was doing. So that's why I sort of tucked that back in there, sort of the least distractions, because you would be to look around and sort of doze off and not really pay attention. Because I didn't really want to feel like I was, competing. Like you're bringing these people to this beautiful place, and then you're turning to, give them a lecture or a presentation or something. And, no matter how interesting what you're saying, somebody's going to find something more interesting to look at somewhere else. So I sort of kept that plainess, private, low spot, and then as the groups were starting to break off into whatever activities they were doing, I wanted to sit a little bit and sketch or read or think or anything that would be the time when you would want the expanse of to interact with the water or stuff like that. So that was sort of my thinking behind it. I really like the feeling of being like on a dock, like walking out onto a dock, being very conscious that I'm elevated above the water, I can feel the water beneath me. So I wasn't sure if I wanted to make all these like concrete, blocks, sort of like the wafers were just coming up in these shapes. I wanted something lighter, and I really wanted to have as much
The more I look at this, the more
have your senses enact the water as much as possible.
that area. Just because
You know, I see that we're standing on, if you were standing on a platform,
all your drawings,
whether it was rock underneath or those posts, I'm not sure because it is sort of one large circle. I'm not sure your experience would be.
Yeah, I think you only experience that from far away, looking at the project, where it has a very definite, right now, a very definite vertical element to it. Or, for instance, if you're sitting down here in the back, and you sort of looking back, it's almost like
I would have to do something,
like,
but it'd be relating to whatever notions I have. This, I try to relate it to what. You're right.
no. But all the water from the aqueducts went into them.
I mean, other than relating it
Your project. When I looked at this project, the first sort of before I had any idea of scale or before I saw your roof or anything, and I looked away, I remember thinking, were those roofs or were those platforms? And I think something very interesting about this quarry is that you never quite know if something is a step or it's a seat or it's a ledge or it's going to give you shade. And I think that's something that can be very exciting about this project, because to me anyway, looking at it, it already almost has that. That could be very exciting about this, that could also help you to touch a little bit more, is if in some places your if you didn't just have one access, because otherwise it wouldn't work. But if you touched in a few different places, you could almost set up a system where, depending on how you explore this, you could use something as a roof, or as a platform, or as something that was on top of you, depending on where you accessed it and how you sort of went up and down. And you still could have some lighter things around, but I think that if you and then also this integration with this a little bit stops the sort of I'm here alone me kind of attitude that seems to that although you were doing it because you were trying to be sensitive to what was there, I think it does make it more of a standalone thing. So I would be very excited to see more of this sort of thing happening, which also relates to your idea of steps and architecture. You sort of said it already because you were talking about the architectural components in the landscape. So, use them as architectural components. Use something as a base. I had a platform that sort of sat right here that would have acted as a roof for this main space. Sort of like right here. And then also ground sort of thing. You could just walk right onto it. And that professors critiquing went away. But I had initially sort of wanted that duality of you can be up top and you can be underneath at the same time.
Anyway, I mean, I could see on the one side actually where that where you're suggesting where that can become above, so some of those roofs would actually become platforms. I think actually though, you both could probably pull things from each other's that are sort of opposite of the intention that you described. I almost, I'm saying more regular forms, I would almost expect it to even push even further away from that where it's not your intention, but I would almost expect to find things that are wrong, like a pool of water up at a higher level, almost really start to separate and make it more of a pool. Yeah, rather than right now you're imitating it. You come up on site, you work your way down towards the water, you land at almost the water level, you sit down so that you're adjacent to the water. And if you took away all of your built form, a little ways down, you could pretty much do the same thing in nature. So it's almost like if you're going to bother bringing the water up above, maybe up above rather than down below. Maybe you were after something else, but something that you want to push to, push a little further of really making a statement that your intention is to not intrude, but to move away from it and make it more.
5 minutes.
For yours, I would almost expect it right now. You said you were sort of wondering whether or not they were roof forms or platforms. I think
but now let's move
my
on.
impression of it when I looked
Oh,
at it,
sorry, Katie. I'm
you
sorry.
sort of wanted to barely.
Don't worry, we'll give you that.
Trying not to intrude on the landscape by
First again,
Like initially, I started out my shapes were more sort of lavish and uniform,
in the section.
sort of
Or
curvy and.
Basically, my idea of a place for us to meet in the quarry was some place that had a sense of privacy. I guess the program wanted a place for the class to meet as well as places for individuals to be alone, and I wanted those places to have a sense of privacy. So, in that same light, I didn't want to make something that was like enclosed, but I wanted a sense of enclosure for concentration purposes and shelter purposes. So, I guess my whole project was pretty much based on an idea, this summer I was in China for 2.5 months, and we went to a lot of bamboo forests, and I just had that sense of serenity inside of them, and so that's what I do is my idea. This is our initial collage of ideas. One of the other things I noticed about the quarry was the sense of how there wasn't really a human scale to it. And like looking at the pictures,
There was no.
yeah, no human. In the sense that I had some people when you were trying to judge the distances and dimensions of the quarry, the pictures without humans in them, where I was sometimes, half the measurement of the actual size of the picture. I wanted to have, I guess my statement pretty much says it, but I wanted to have something that was bold and outstanding, like the quarry itself, but it was natural in form without necessarily imitating nature. So my initial idea was in an 1/8" model. I knew I wanted to have that. Another idea was I wanted to incorporate into my design was the idea of the curve and how
Because the reason that I realized it's probably
gesture can serve the dual purpose of providing that space of interaction and forcing people to be together on the inner side of the curve, and just on the other side, people are provided their privacy and independence against the world last week. And the sun was coming around the quarry this way, and so I liked other pictures of the site because of the way the quarry provides a natural shelter and sense of security to me. I think, especially for a classroom setting, to be in such a vulnerable place along in any other place in the quarry would be distracting. So I like the way how this is kind of hugging the site. And then all along here, along the outer rings, there are a lot of different places for people to have that sense of independence and be alone. So I also included these, and it kind of was following the idea back to nature about, like the seeds got blown off this way, or these are things away from the main cluster. This is just half inch, as this is 1/4 inch, and this is an model, we're just thinking of
program will try.
it would be connected. I also wanted to include an inch border around the pole to allow light to come in. So I didn't have it solid purposely, so that the inside, looking from the bottom up, there's just, you can imagine when the sun's shining down, that with all the boards and voids, how the sun would shine in and create patterns on the rocks is the way it'll hit the 3-dimensional really interesting. And across from the quarry, this is the site So you can see in the 8-inch model, I think it'd be really striking to have these kind of frosted glass with the sun shining through, creating like a pattern of
I think you're right in noting that this would necessarily be an all-weather sort of place. Rains in the interstitial spaces, you might not want to be there, so you have over problems. And I would say, well, if it's just frosted glass, well, what is it doing? I mean, I guess it'll diffuse the light a little bit, but it's not creating shade. If it's a really hot day, such as we had earlier this summer, so again, this idea of having different kinds of covering, Angela's idea of spreading it out some would allow you to take the idea that you brought back from China, but maybe make it a little more in keeping with what the program would be here. You could start from the inspiration of what you saw there, but it was any kind of, well, if you walked in Bamboo, you know it's a different sort of place than a quarry, and for a different sort of the experience there is different. You tend to walk through or something. You're not going to have a class here or in a studio or something. So requirements for shelter or something.
It's very similar actually to some of these plants growing up out of the rock. You have these columns coming out, seemingly coming out of the cracks in the rock. And like Angela said, I think breaking it up a bit would be beneficial. Maybe there's different types of material that are above your head. I know when you walk into a grove of bamboo, it's actually quite dark in there because of the complexity of the leaves and the density of the leaves above your head. So if you broke this up a bit on the side and created different intensities of columns, and maybe there's 2 or 3 types of roofing material, call it, where you might create areas that are a bit darker, some a bit lighter, some maybe in the middle or wide open, or another way could be that you change the experience of moving up high on the quarry down to the quarry, so you're passing through this kind of forest and then finally you're back out in the open again. So I think adding that kind of diversity to the architecture would be beneficial.